Is there any benefit from installing Windows 7 64-bit when you have less than 4 GB of RAM? I've recently purchased Windows 7 Ultimate. I have an AMD Athlon 64X2 5000 Plus with 2 GB DDR2 RAM. I know RAM has gotten much cheaper, I know, but I am not going to be able to upgrade my RAM for about a year. My question is obviously this: will I get any benefit from installing 64-bit Windows over 32-bit if I'm only using 2 GB of RAM? As I understand, the minimum requirement is 2 GB and max is 192 GB, so if the minimum for 64-bit is 2 GB and the minimum for 32-bit is 1 GB, will I lose performance if I chose to install 64-bit at its minimum requirement over 32-bit whose minimum is half the amount? I would like to install the 64-bit edition if only because it's the future. 192 GB of RAM. That's incredible. Plus I've heard it simply performs better. But that is with a larger amount of RAM. I've tried to make this question as easy to decipher as possible. Any advice would be greatly appreciated.
I see only 3 potential benefits. '64-bit applications can grant you a performance boost when higher numerical precision is needed. If you are only using your PC for stuff like Firefox or iTunes, you probably won't get a boost, but if you are using some scientific or higher demanding applications, it is definitely the way to go. Drivers are usually more stable since Microsoft requires 64-bit drivers to be certificated, which does mean that at least some stress testing was done. 32-bit Windows do not have that requirement, so manufacturers tend to be cheap. Unfortunately, this also means that new drivers are usually first available for 32-bit version and 64-bit version may come little bit later. If you are a developer, it may be useful for testing your application in 64-bit environment. When you have 64-bit Windows, you can test both 32-bit and 64-bit behavior. Personally, I would stick with 32-bit Windows in this particular case unless you have very good reason.
The other answers here cover the pros and cons fairly well, but consider this: if you think you'll be upgrading your memory in a year anyhow, and will be upgrading it to 4 GB or more, then you might as well install Windows 7 x64 now, so that you don't have to reinstall later. It is not possible to do an in-place upgrade from a 32-bit installation to a 64-bit installation, so you may want to save yourself the trouble and just install the 64-bit version now.
Another benefit to using 64-bit Windows is that there are some other architecture changes that go along with the move from 32 to 64 bits, more registers for example. The 64-bit operating system will be able to take advantage of those changes.
In addition to what Josip says, keep in mind that since address pointers are twice wider, memory consumption of 64-bit programs is slightly higher on the disk as well as in memory. This is easily confirmed by comparing 32-bit and 64-bit OS installation images.
If you want to support the channel, please consider subscribing.